I'm Jacob Hornberger, president of the Future of Freedom Foundation, and welcome to this week's Trump Watch, the show that keeps track of what President Trump is doing to save you the time of having to do so, and analyze and examine what he's been doing during the previous week. Well, President Trump, Tariff Man, has imposed tariffs once again. This is one of his favorite public policy tools, the ability to raise taxes on the American people without going to Congress. 25% on taxation on imported goods from Mexico, 25% on Canada, 10% on China. And keep in mind, these are all sales taxes. It's just like going to a store and buying something and paying a sales tax. But the only difference is that this is a sales tax on something that's been produced in a country, in a foreign country. But it's a tax, and we live in a country where the ruler has the ability to just unilaterally raise taxes. He doesn't have to go to Congress and say, hey, I want to propose a tax increase. No, we live in a country where the president wields the authority. We can see this, of saying, I'm raising taxes by 25% on the American people. And he says that this will lead to a golden era, that there's going to be suffering for a while, but everything's going to come out to a golden era and make America great again through taxation and through increased levels of taxation. So you have the spectacle of Republicans cheering him, saying, yay, President Trump, thank you for taxing us. Thank you for taxing us. Golden era around the corner. I mean, this is ridiculous. It's like, beat us again, beat us again. It feels so good. Raise our taxes even more. And how does he get away with this power to just levy taxes willy-nilly? Emergency. He says, I'm decreeing an emergency. Now, this is the time-honored way that dictators have used throughout history. There's a national emergency. Give me temporary powers. Now, usually they go to Congress and say, give me temporary powers. But here, what Congress has apparently done is said, well, whenever you decree a national emergency, you automatically have the powers. You don't have to come to us. Now, I don't see any authority in the Constitution where Congress can delegate its powers. It has the power over the purse. It decides how taxes are going to be raised and how much taxes are going to be raised and so forth. But here it's delegated its power to Trump, saying, well, no, you can decide this, but all you got to do is decree an emergency. So Trump says, national emergency on the border. And what's the emergency? I mean, you go down to the border, there's no emergency conditions down there. You talk to people and say, where's the emergency? Well, there's illegal immigrants and drugs coming across. Well, there's been illegal immigrants and drugs coming across since I was a kid. I mean, I lived over 30 years on the border. I've seen this, the war on drugs, the war on immigrants. I mean, the Border Patrol would come under our farm. This was back in the 60s without a warrant. So this is nothing new. It's not like, giant emergency that things have changed here. And but by saying, national emergency, invasion, Trump's able to get away with, well, okay, now I got the emergency powers and I can now levy taxes on the American people. And this invasion thing is very interesting because Trump is using that as a justification for his whole mass deportation plan, and says, we're being invaded. And there's right-wingers that have bought into this invasion thing. I write them, and whenever they write me this, I say, don't go out and start killing the invaders, okay, because they will indict you for murder, and they will put you away for murder. Most of them, I think, take my advice, but that guy in El Paso that several years ago that he went out there and started shooting a bunch of Mexicans and Mexican Americans there at the Walmart because he bought into this invasion thing. He's protecting America from the invaders. He's over there killing invaders. And he got indicted and convicted and sentenced, and rightly so. Judge didn't let him go in there and say, no, Jacob, no, Your Honor, I'm here protecting America. I'm killing the invaders. But there's people that really buy into this thing. I'm familiar with this guy. We're email correspondents. I think he lives in Wyoming, elderly guy, but he is scared to death. He's convinced that America's under siege of these illegal immigrants, and I'm convinced that he lives in his basement with the door locked, and then he probably orders his groceries to be delivered and probably peers out the window to see if it's really the grocery delivery person, or make sure the grocery delivery person isn't the vanguard of a foreign army coming to get him. He's convinced they're coming to get him. I mean, this guy lives in fear. Well, most Americans live in fear. I mean, that's the coin of the realm of a national security state, which is what we are. Americans are afraid of everything, which is ironic because we live under the most powerful government in history, with the most powerful military and the intelligence establishment, and we have the weakest country. I mean, the frightened country, a scared country. Americans are scared of everything. Illegal immigrants, terrorists, Reds, communists, Russia, China, drug dealers. I mean, the Russians are coming. The Russians are coming as soon as they finish with conquering Ukraine with their all-powerful military. They're going to come and get us. I mean, this fear, and this guy demonstrates this fear. He wrote me recently with a link to an article where a guy at the border, U.S.-Mexico border, had been taken into custody, and he was a Russian, and he had 2 passports. And so this guy writes me and says, you see why we need border controls? The Russians are coming. I mean, he's convinced that this guy was like a fifth columnist, that the Russians are coming, the Russians are coming. I mean, there's just no way to live in this. When you have a society where people are scared of everything, that means you've got an all-powerful government. When you've got a small government, you've got a powerful nation. And there's 2 separate entities here. You've got government, you've got the nation. You see, and this is what a lot of statists don't realize. They, when they talk about America needs to do this and America needs to do that, what they really mean is the federal government needs to do this, like a real invasion. Like, take the invasion of Iraq. Okay, that's an invasion. Bombs, missiles, death, destruction, violence. They destroyed the whole country, and that's an invasion. And that's that is totally different from immigrants coming in with their babies in their arms, okay, trying to seek a better way of life, trying to sustain their lives through labor, trying to improve their lives. Those are just migrants, people moving to better their lives or maybe even save their lives. Totally different from what happens in Iraq. Now, let me digress here, sort of, because as Trump's immigration plan, as everybody knows, he's got this massive deportation plan, and they've got this ruse going. Oh, the only people we're deporting are the violent criminals. Well, it's a ruse. It's a design to make people feel good and not guilty about all these families that they're uprooting from their lives, their neighborhoods, their businesses, where they work, everything, and just uprooting them and taking them out and sending them back to their country of origin. And so if people think, oh, well, it's just a murderer, just a rapist, well, they don't feel as bad about the normal people. But it's just really a ruse to cover up the fact that they're inflicting so much misery and suffering on just peaceful, law-abiding people. And even sometimes you have horror stories from people that have even been convicted of crimes. I mean, it seems to me that when you're convicted of a crime and you're sentenced and you pay your price to society, okay, well, that's the whole criminal justice idea. Now, if you want to build into your criminal justice system that as soon as the person fills his sentence, that he then is going to be deported, well, okay, that's one thing. But to have an entire immigration control system as a justification for getting rid of this tiny minority, because the rates at which immigrants commit crimes, illegal immigrants commit crimes, is even lower than the rate at which Americans commit crimes. But they use that as a justification for going after everybody. Now, the reason I brought up Iraq in this context is that several years ago, there was a guy here in the United States who had been brought over when he was 6 months old, and from Iraq. Now, remember, Iraq was the country that the U.S. government brought a paradise to with its invasion. It was a clear invasion, war of aggression. The U.S. was always the aggressor. It's what the Nuremberg War Crimes Tribunal called a war of aggression. The U.S. was the invader. The Iraqi government was the defending power here. But they were bringing freedom to Iraq. It was called Operation Iraqi Freedom, you see. Well, not to the people they were killing. I mean, because they killed multitudes of people. Obviously, they don't get the free society that Operation Iraqi Freedom was going to do because they're dead. But the ones that were left living, even though they may not have an arm or a leg, or they're crippled now or blind from some bomb or whatever, they were now going to be living in a paradise, paradise of freedom. Ironically, I've never heard of one single American, including any member of Congress, that has ever taken a vacation to Iraq. Not one. Okay, I mean, here's this paradise that they established with their invasion, Operation Iraqi Freedom, and not one has taken a vacation. But this guy had been brought over when he's 6 months old, and he was mentally impaired. Clearly had mental issues, and he had diabetes. He suffered from diabetes, and but he had been convicted of several crimes, which he had been punished for and served a sentence. And so the guy was sick physically, and he was sick mentally too. Well, in a society like the United States, there's all kinds of infrastructure to help people like that. Okay, doctors will lend a helping hand. Charitable organizations will lend a helping hand, trying to help a person like this get through life, a person who's clearly mentally impaired. Which is probably one of the reasons why he's out there committing these crimes. It's hard to get a job and so forth. I'm not justifying it. I'm just explaining that in every society you have people like this, but in the wealthier societies, there's more resources to try to help these people get from birth to death. Well, what they did with this guy was return him to his country of origin, Iraq, because he was a criminal, you see, and he was an Iraqi-born person. So they return him, and it's just a horror story. I mean, it's a real horror story that this guy is right in the middle of, I don't know what town whether he was in Baghdad or somewhere else, but what's he supposed to do? He can't speak Arabic. That's their language. He speaks only English. He's suffering from diabetes. Now, U.S. official says, oh, what's the problem? We gave him a full supply of insulin. Well, yeah, but how long does that last? And the guy has no place to sleep. He has no money. He can't get a job. I mean, he couldn't even get a job in the United States, much less here. And people hate him. He's an American. Now, I know what you're going to say. No, Jacob, that's not possible. Iraqis love Americans. We brought them Operation Iraqi Freedom. We brought them a paradise. Well, it doesn't work that way. And so this guy was calling home saying, please, I'm dying. I don't have my insulin. I can't. He's sleeping out on the streets. He's begging to be returned to the United States, which anybody would be, even if you're not mentally impaired. And day after day, they just ignored him. The U.S. officials just ignored him until he was found dead. Short. I don't know how long he lived, but it's like, oh, wow. Now, they did show grace and mercy by letting his body be returned. They wouldn't let him return alive, but they let him return dead, you see, even though he was going to maybe take a cemetery plot that belonged to an American or something that it could have been used by an American. But this is just one horror story here in this forced deportation. And keep in mind also that, they use it as a measure of, they say, oh, Venezuela's exporting their criminals. They're exporting their criminals. Venezuela's not exporting anybody. These are people fleeing a country that is in the throes of economic desperation, in large part because of the United States. It's not just Maduro's socialist system down there. It's also the sanctions that the U.S. have imposed on this country with the aim of removing Maduro from power. Okay, the idea is you make the Venezuelan peoples so desperate, you impoverish them, you bankrupt them, you take everything from them. They have to sell their most prized possessions to try to get money to survive, and you keep them there in order that they will rise up and oust their dictator from power. No matter how many of them are killed, because there's gun control there, and which a lot of Americans favor. There's a lot of Americans favor gun control. Well, now they've got this dictator who clearly lost the last presidential election, but he's got the national security establishment behind him, and he controls the Supreme Court, he controls the election commission, but the opponents there had all the tally sheets from about 80% of the voting districts and showing that he lost like 2-1 or 3-1. He wouldn't release the tally sheets on the other 20% that he had. He clearly lost, but he's got the military behind him. And it's a clear lesson of the power of a national security state, that the determining factor is the military intelligence establishment in any national security state, including here. You know, the big January 6th thing of, it was threatening to keep Trump in power is pure nonsense. I mean, you know, those people go in there. It was a protest that went out of control. Protests sometimes go out of control. You know, the mob mentality and so, but nobody walks in there with AR-15s and AK-47s and homemade bombs and Molotov cocktails and stuff. It's ridiculous. The only person who was murdered in there with a gun was Ashley Babbitt, and that was at the hands of a Capitol policeman who should have been indicted for the murder. But if the military, here's what a lot of people don't realize. If the military intelligence establishment, the Pentagon, the CIA, and the NSA, had decreed Trump to be the winner, he would have remained in power. There's nothing anybody could have done about it. And anything anybody would have done about it. They were the determining factor, just like in Venezuela. That's what one of the distinguishing aspects of a national security state, that the military is the deciding factor. And the military issued a statement at some point in there that says they were decreeing Biden to be the winner. And that's when Trump realized his goose was cooked, not because of the protests at the Capitol, but because the military had decreed that Biden was the winner. And that's what determined that election. Well, that's what's happened in Venezuela. They've sided with Maduro, and they're rounding up protesters and convicting them of crimes and torturing them and so forth. And well, just because somebody's decreed a criminal in Cuba or here protesting doesn't make them a real criminal. I mean, yeah, I know what people would say, Jacob, but it is a criminal because those are the laws of Venezuela or Cuba or Red China or North Korea. Bull. Just bull. I don't put any of those protesters that are in jail for committing a crime in the category of criminal. But now Trump is talking to Maduro. I mean, so he's giving legitimacy to this guy. He's negotiating with him to accept these deported Venezuelan immigrants. There's been like 8 million immigrants that have left Venezuela, some of whom have come to the United States. Naturally, they're seeking asylum from the country that is there putting them in these economic conditions with the sanctions, not to mention the drug war. See, the drug war is a big part of this thing too. And that's what brings into existence the drug cartels. And so, you know, the cartel in Venezuela recruits a 15-year-old girl and says, you're going to come and work for us or we're going to kill your family. What's a father supposed to do? What's a mother supposed to do? They're on the verge of starvation. They need jobs. The girl is getting offered a nice job with the cartel. Well, a lot of them decide to leave. And so they come to the United States, who is the cause or a cause of all these problems. And Trump says, no. You need to go back. You need to be forced back. You can imagine Maduro smiling as these people are getting off the plane. He says, come over here, you little traitors. I'd be terrified if I were them as to what's going to happen to them when they start offloading on those planes. It's a horror story. It's just an absolute horror story because what the immigration controller is saying, what Trump is saying is, you need to go back and die. You're going to die of starvation, but we all die, okay? And or if you're able to get out, don't come here. We don't want you. But we want you to stay there so you can help oust Maduro that he's there negotiating with. Now imagine, by negotiating with him, he's legitimizing him. And imagine what that does to the protesters, to the dissidents. Think of the discouragement when they see a U.S. president negotiating and legitimizing their unelected or illegitimately elected dictator. Now, in any event, Trump backed off from his tariff threat against Mexico and Canada almost immediately. He saw the stock markets starting to crash, or at least take a significant dip, and he says, "Okay, no, let's talk." And he blinked, and he says, "Okay, let's delay these a month while we talk." Well, in return for this, Sheinbaum says, "Okay, that's great. She's the president of Mexico. I'll send 10,000 troops to the border," and that made Trump really happy because now he's got is 20,000 troops, 82nd Airborne or whatever down there on the border. So you've got this militarized police state. But then you've got on the Mexican side, you've got the Mexican troops on that side. Now, I've talked about the Berlin Wall here that Trump constructed down there, and some right wings write me sometimes say, Jacob, it's not really a Berlin Wall because the Berlin Wall was keeping people out, and this our Berlin or our wall here is keeping people from coming in. It's not keeping Americans from going out. Well, I'm not sure that that's really a distinction that's worthy of any note, because let's assume that West Germany had on its side of the wall took the same position that the U.S. does and says, we have our border here between West Germany and East Germany. No East German can cross his border without going through the system, applying, even if it takes 7 or 8 years or whatever. You have to follow the rules, and we don't want you crawling over the wall and coming over here. And so people want to flee East Germany, the communist system. They're starving. They want a better life. So they try, and they get shot at both directions. They got the East Germans sharpshooters shooting at them as they're trying to get over the wall, and you got the West Germans shooting them. What difference does it make? Whether they're shot by a West German bullet or an East German bullet, they're still dead. And so I'm not sure that's really a valid distinction. But in any event, he's now got Scheinbaum with Mexican troops on this side of the Berlin Wall, aiming their guns at Mexican citizens. Okay, they're now serving in the role that the East Germans did. They're preventing people from crossing over the wall, just like East Germany was. That's pathetic. I mean, it amazes me that Scheinbaum falls for this. Now, I mean, I understand what she's going through, that Mexico is a poor country, and a 25% tariff is going to devastate people there, businesses there. But notice what's going on here also, that Trump with his tariff is trying to hurt the Mexican people, the Mexican society. He's trying to hurt businesses there. Okay? Now, where is the logic of this? It's a very poor country, and pardon me if I'm mistaken, but don't all the immigration control advocates lament the Mexicans who are coming over into the United States? I mean, in this, partly what this is all about? Oh my gosh, we're getting invaded, right? I mean, all the Mexicans are coming over to cross into the land that used to be the northern half of Mexico, that the U.S. stole from Mexico. And so there's that lamentation that they're coming, they're invading, Jacob. Remember, there's an emergency. So notice the logic, Trump's logic. He's going to target Mexican society, Mexican business, with economic impoverishment with this tariff. He's trying to shut down businesses there. He's trying to create economic distress. What is the consequence of that policy? Duh. You've got more people that are suffering that are now going to be trying to come into the United States. I mean, it should be the exact opposite. We should be implementing policies that encourage Mexico to have prosperity. And that's what free trade is all about. Free trade is about prosperity. I mean, that's why they're so upset with these tariffs, is that Trump is creating chaos and crisis, economic chaos and crisis, not just for American businesses. Remember, he says, it's a golden era, it's a golden era. He was bankrupting American farmers when he started this tariff nonsense with China the first time he was president. American farmers going out of business who had been doing great gangbuster business by selling their crops into China. China retaliates with tariffs on those farm products, and Trump says, golden era, here's your welfare. And he put them on welfare. And so it does cause economic harm. There's no question that and that's his intent. But he achieves the exact opposite. I presume that he knows this exact opposite. He creates economic distress and harm in Mexico, in addition to taxing the American people, that cause more Mexicans to come over, that he uses as the excuse to declare a bigger emergency and more omnipotent powers and more militarization of the border and more power. I mean, it makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. Why treat people like this? What is the point of treating people like this? It just makes no sense. But yet this is what they've done with their immigration control system. I've seen this thing all my life. I spent more than 30 years on the border. I saw the Border Patrol. I saw FBI, and I wasn't there when Homeland Security came into existence. But they've been waging this system for decades, and they just keep cracking down. And notice that Trump used to say, and the Trumpsters used to say, oh, it's the problem is Biden wasn't enforcing immigration controls. That's why they're coming across, Jacob. Biden's open borders. He's become a libertarian, Jacob. Biden's a libertarian now. Open borders, open. It's ridiculous. Open borders is the abolition of the Border Patrol, ICE, no deportations, no restrictions. Everybody's open borders in the United States. 99%, not everybody. 99% favor open borders here in the United States. Okay, no border controls on the states whatsoever. Not even to keep us safe. Every day, hundreds of thousands of people from Maryland cross the bridge there, the border, and come into my state of Virginia, where I live. And nobody's vetting them. They can include murderers, rapists, thieves, communists, North Koreans, Iranians, terrorists, ISIS, whatever. Nobody's vetting them. It's like that guy in Texas that crossed the Louisiana border and killed those people in New Orleans. Nobody vetted him because there's no border controls. It's a very harmonious system. And so there is a way out of this whole morass, but people just won't let go. I've said it for the whole 36 years at FFF. There is only one solution to this morass. And Trump is acknowledging this. He's acknowledging that what he was saying about Biden and what the Trumpsters were saying about Biden, that he had ordered the Border Patrol to stand down and not enforce America's system of immigration controls. He's admitting that was all false. Biden was enforcing the border. It just wasn't working. So there's a big difference between a system not working and a system of open borders. Okay, open borders, there are no restrictions, just like we have domestically. Whenever you hear the word open borders, think domestically. Virginia and Maryland, okay, Texas and Louisiana, no controls at all. But that's clearly not what Biden had. But Trump's admitting that now, because by getting Mexico involved in his system, 10,000 troops on the Mexican side, he's admitting that his system can't enforce his own system like Biden could. If he could, he would have said, okay, Biden wasn't enforcing it. I ordered the Border Patrol to start enforcing it. Wouldn't work. He knows it doesn't work. And it's the same with the drug war. They think that, this 10,000 troops is going to stop the fentanyl coming over and everybody's going to stop dying of fentanyl here in the United States. It's ridiculous. This drug war has been going on since I was a kid. I mean, my dad was U.S. Commissioner when I was a kid, back in the 60s, U.S. Magistrate. They were bringing drug dealers to his office every day for bail hearing, preliminary hearings. Timothy Leary was brought before him, the noted LSD guru. This thing's been going on a long time. And 10,000 troops is not going to stop it. And you know why they're dying of fentanyl? Because it's corrupted drugs. Yeah, people are buying drugs that don't realize that they've been overly corrupted with fentanyl. That's what a black market does, because the producers don't worry about getting sued. In a regular legalized market, you don't have that situation because people are buying their drugs from reputable businesses, pharmacies, and the like, who can get sued and who are concerned about putting out a good product. Now you can sit here and say, well, Jacob, people shouldn't be on drugs. Well, that may be true, just like people shouldn't drink alcohol or smoke tobacco or whatever. But what business is that is yours or the government's? I mean, that's their business. And that's what this whole drug war is about. It's about stopping people from taking stuff that the government doesn't approve of, because they look at the citizenry as parts of a beehive. They're not being productive. And but all that should be in the private sector, Alcoholics Anonymous and drug rehab programs and so forth. It's no business of the government, and it never has worked. Just like alcohol prohibition didn't work. It just produces violence. That's why you have the drug cartels. And so this notion that she's going to crack down on the drug cartels, they've been doing that, cracking down on the drug cartels for decades. That's what's destroyed Mexico. An American would be stupid to be driving around Mexico as a tourist. Nobody in his right mind would do that. even just crossing the border to Nuevo Laredo, my hometown there of Laredo, the sister city, is nuts. But it wasn't nuts when I was a kid before this whole drug war got established. Before I've cited Netflix's series on Narcos and Narcos Mexico. If you haven't seen these series, I highly recommend it because they show you that as soon as they bust one drug cartel, which they've been doing for decades, and all the big publicity and the press is there and record drug busts and all this nonsense, they're replaced by 5 new ones. That's how a black market works. These 10,000 troops are not going to stop. It's all a ruse to make it look like, Sheinbaum is doing. And I don't blame her. I mean, in a sense, I mean, she's trying to appease Trump, but I think it's pathetic. I do blame her in the sense of playing his game. What she really ought to do is say, we're not going to enforce your immigration control laws, and we're moving any restrictions. We're legalizing drugs across Mexico. We're ending this drug war here as far as our country's concerned. And then she starts to restore peace and prosperity there in Mexico. But as long as she plays Trump's game, Mexico will continue to be a very, very violent, devastated society, one that is not very attractive, not one that is Mexico querido y lindo like it used to be. I mean, my parents drove to Acapulco for their honeymoon. That's how safe Mexico once was. Nobody in his right mind would do that. So that's what's been going on. We'll see how things develop. There's a lot of other things that we could be talking about, the USAID, but Richard Eberly and I talked about that in Libertarian Angle this week, so I invite you to watch that. But there's other things going on that we haven't gotten to. In a couple of days, the deadline for the JFK records, or at least the plan for releasing them. Trump didn't order their release like people think he did. No, he ordered that a plan be made. That reminds me of a committee. He should have appointed a committee to study the problem. So, as you can imagine, I'm pretty skeptical about this whole thing. But in any event, that's this issue of Trump Watch. Thank you all for tuning in, and I look forward to seeing you next week.